Hey Chooms, I'm Agent Paradox 115, and this is the ultimate Avenged Sevenfold Iceberg, created by yours truly. With Avenged Sevenfold being my favorite metal band, and maybe even my favorite music artist in general, and them having a new album on the way, I figured I'd have my first proper YouTube video be an Iceberg that dove into some of the band's history. Let's get started. Starting off, let's discuss my favorite entry on the whole Iceberg. Something that anyone who's both a COD and A7X fan will be familiar with. Avenged Sevenfold has made multiple songs for the Black Ops series, almost all of which were for zombies. Not Ready to Die on Call of the Dead, Nightmare on Moon, Carry On at the end of the Black Ops 2 campaign, Shepherd of Fire on Origins, and Mad Hatter on 9. 3 of these, Mad Hatter, Not Ready to Die, and Carry On, were made for their game rather than being pulled from an album. Now I've gotta say, as a little side note, this entry is very personal for me. I've been a huge Treyarch Zombies fan since Black Ops 2 came out like 10 or so years ago at this point. Crazy, I know. And I still vividly remember doing 4-player split-screen co-op with my brother and his friends back in the day on Transit and Die Rise and Buried. In addition to that, it was Carry On and Shepherd of Fire, as well as those really cool Easter egg songs on each Zombies map that not only got me into Avenged Sevenfold, but the metal genre as a whole. Something that I will always be thankful for. I can't wait to see what Treyarch does for zombies in 2024. So here's a funny piece of lore that every fan has heard of. In late October 2016, Chris Jericho, the lead singer of the band Fozzy, and a friend of M Shadows, announced that Sevenfold's 7th studio album was titled Voltaic Oceans and set to release later that year on December 9th. Days later, on October 28th, Christmas would come early when the stage was surprise dropped. So what was the deal with Voltaic? Well, it wasn't real, and simply the band messing with us. One might say it was even the band doing a little bit of trolling, a minor amount of tomfoolery, if you will. Here's another one of my favorite entries. On April 12th, 2008, A7X concluded their Taste the Chaos tour with a fantastic concert in their hometown of Long Beach, California, over a decade later, and it is still widely regarded as their best live show. And it's easy to see why. I'll leave a link in the description to an HD upscaling of the event. If you haven't watched it already, please do yourself a favor and change that. In my opinion, it's a sign of talent when a live version can sound just as good, if not better, than a studio recording of a song, which is the case with pretty much every song from this concert. Released on September 16th, 2008, alongside the Live in the LBC DVD, Diamonds in the Rough was a compilation, quote, album, if you can even call it that mostly consisted of unreleased B-sides from the self-titled era, but also covers of Flash of the Blade by Iron Maiden and Walk by Pantera, as well as alternate versions of Afterlife and Almost Easy. 11 years later, in 2020, it was re-released on streaming services with 5 more tracks. Lost It All, a bonus from the Nightmare CD, 4 AM from the Welcome to the Family EP, a cover of Black Sabbath's Paranoid, St. James, originally from the Hail to the King Deluxe Edition, and Set Me Free, an unreleased single from 2013. Now, I'm sure everyone has heard of this, quote, album, or is at least familiar with it somewhat, but I figure I'd include it on this Iceberg anyways, because if you're anything like me, you didn't know about the original 2008 version, and always wondered why many people never considered it to be an actual album, which I suppose is because none of the songs are actually, well, songs made for it, and are rather just, B-sides or covers and whatnot. It's a very interesting listen. There are some bangers up there for sure, like St. James, 4 AM, Set Me Free, and Dancing Dead most of all, which is actually in my top 10. But then you have some songs where, let's just say I understand why they're not considered to be A-side material by the band. Girl I Know being a good example, which is a very interesting song, as I'm sure anyone who's heard it can tell you. So this is a series that ran from October 2018 to October 2020, where the band discussed the creation process of many of their songs. Fermi Paradox, A Little Piece of Heaven, and Save Me, just to name a few. Now, given this series' popularity, it would be really nice to see it come back. and maybe even done for some of the songs off Libad, which, as of this recording, has yet to come out. If you're watching this from the future and the album has already come out for you, I really hope it's good. Here's a quick one. Into the Ether is a 55-second long instrumental that was released as an NFT back in early 2021. You know, when the NFT craze was at its height, and A7X made the totally uncontroversial and very well-received decision to join in on the fun by making and selling NFTs of their own. Don't you miss those days? Pinkly Smooth was a short-lived metal band created by the Rev prior to his creation of Avenged Sevenfold. It's worth noting that Sinister Gates and Just Insane were also on this band, the latter being a bass player for Avenged Sevenfold during their early days before they got Johnny Christ. Pinkly only has one album, the very interestingly titled Unfortunate Snort. I'll leave a link to it down below. The full thing can be found here on YouTube, but unfortunately, it's not on any streaming services, or at the very least, not on Spotify. Here's a quick one. In July of 2019, M Shadows was added to Black Ops 4's Battle Royale game mode, Blackout. Now, as a side note, this is a funny entry to me for a couple of reasons. For one, Blackout is somehow canon to the Black Ops timeline, meaning that M Shadows canonically has fought alongside other characters like Woods, Mason, Reznov, Richtofen, and other Black Ops characters, which is just very, very funny to me. There's also Blackout itself. Like, I remember this was a pretty big deal when BO4 was first revealed, but nobody talks about it anymore, and I don't remember it being anywhere near as big in its prime as Warzone was. In fact, this entry is probably the first time I've even thought about Blackout since the game mode was first revealed. Are there any people here who played it back in the day that can tell me if it was any good or not? I only played like 2 matches of it. Here's a very interesting one. Released in 2014, Hail to the King Deathbat is a third-person, fantasy-esque action game about the, quote, origins of the mythical Deathbat logo, end quote. The game is available for $6 on Steam. It used to be on mobile as well, but isn't compatible with current-gen devices. There's also a short animated web series of the same name that acts as a prequel. I'll leave a link in the description down below. Here's a very interesting one. It's Easier is the demo of an unreleased song from the self-titled era. It was leaked by the YouTube channel Jennifer Lieberman, who, according to her, got the song and demos of Until the End and Scream off a laptop sold to her by a man claiming to be the Rev's friend back in 2015. Again, this is all according to her in the comments she made below these videos, and there's really no way of verifying these claims. But regardless, I thought this was a very interesting find. The tracklist of the upcoming album has a song on it called Easier, and while the chances are low, it would be cool if this was an official release of It's Easier. The Making of Avenged Sevenfold is a documentary about, well, the making of Avenged Sevenfold. The self-titled album, that is, not the band. Just like All Access, it's a must-watch for any and every Sevenfold fan, especially if you're a self-titled enjoyer like me. My favorite fun fact from this doc, so much so that it almost became its own entry originally, was how Unbound the Wild Ride, a very unappreciated song by the way, was originally titled Disneyland Acid Trip. This band's creativity never ceases to amaze me. I'll leave a link to an HD remaster of the doc in the description below. Speaking of which, before we move on, I'd like to give a special shout out to the channel TSTS in all caps, as they're responsible for the HD upscaling of Live in the LBC and the Making of Avenged Sevenfold doc that I'm leaving in the description below. They've done a great service to this community, and I can't thank them enough. Go check them out. So M Shadows is a huge fan of Lana Del Rey. In an interview with Revolver magazine back in 2017, he stated that her album Lust for Life was one of his favorite albums of the year, and said that he'd be open to collabing with her, which is something that I would be very, very curious to hear. 2 years later in 2019, her album of that year, Norman Rockwell, would also appear on his top 5 favorite albums of the year list. There was also an interview with Revolver magazine back in 2012 where he praised her singing and songwriting abilities, as well as, once again, praising the album that she released that year. But I can't seem to find that interview, so I'm going off a condensed version of it posted on Q1057.com on November 30th of that year. It's good to have diverse music tastes, right? This entry refers to none other than Sinister Gates' dad, Brian Hanner, also known as, well, Papa Gates. Throughout the years, he's played for the band quite a few times. He was behind the beautiful acoustic guitar at the end of Sidewinder, the closing solo on Coming Home and Angels, and the solo on Tonight the World Dies. Hopefully we see his talents again on Live Ad. I mean, seriously, I can't get over how good that closing solo on Sidewinder is. I would love to hear something like that again. Earlier on the Iceberg, we discussed M. Shadow's wife, Valerie, and her contributions to the band. The fun facts don't end there though, as not only does she have a twin sister, but said twin is married to none other than Sinister Gates. That's right, Shadows and Gates are in-laws, with Gates and Michelle, the twin sister, getting married just a year after Valerie and Shadows did. So this entry refers to how the band, or at least some of its members, have had features on multiple other songs. M. Shadows has made an appearance on Nothing to Say by Slash, Haze by Devices, and Go Alone by Hell or High Water, while both him and Sinister Gates were also on Save Me by Machine Gun Kelly, something that I was very surprised to learn. I never thought I'd hear Sevenfold on a MGK song. At long last, we've arrived at the very bottom. This entry refers to two punk rock bands that Zacky Vengeance, M. Shadows, and A7X's very first bass player, Matthew Went, were a part of prior to Avenged Sevenfold's creation. Zacky was a member of MPA, while Shadows and Matthew were a part of Successful Failure. The reason why this entry is at the very bottom of the iceberg is because of how little info there seems to be on either of these bands. The most info I could find on Successful Failure was from a Instagram post from 2017 showing a CD signed by Matthew Went. MPA, on the other hand, is only very briefly mentioned by Zacky in the All Access doc that we discussed earlier, at least as far as I can find. It wouldn't be an iceberg without something very, very obscure, and this is the most obscure piece of Sevenfold history that I could find, and worthy of being at the very bottom of this iceberg, at least to me. If there's anything more obscure than this, I would love to know. Alright, Chooms, that is it. That is the end of the Avenged Sevenfold Iceberg. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I really hope you guys learned something. I'm a huge Avenged Sevenfold fan, and when I noticed that there wasn't really an iceberg for them on YouTube, I decided to be the change I want to see in the world, and make that my first YouTube video. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys learned something. I know this is my first YouTube video, so I know there might be some issues with the audio and stuff. I hope those aren't too bad. I hope my obnoxiously loud computer fan didn't ruin anything. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. My next video is going to be a Cyberpunk 2077 iceberg, which I am really excited to make. So much so that I almost stopped working on this video so I could start working on that one. It is way bigger than this iceberg as well. So if you are a fan of Cyberpunk 2077 like I am, then please do stick around. I'm really excited to start working on that video. It's gonna take a while to make, but I'll try to have it out as soon as possible. And there are some entries from this iceberg that I cut for the sake of meeting a deadline. So let me know if you want a part 2 to this one. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Stay blessed and take care.